Good evening, everybody who has zoomed in. Warm welcome to everyone. This is our third webinar in the series commemorating World Mental Health Day, which falls today, 10th of October. Theme this time is Make Mental Health and Well-Being for All a Global Priority, a very appropriate theme. Our single panelist today is Professor Shehan Williams, Dean of the Faculty of Medicine of the University of California, and also consultant psychiatrist. So we'll be talking a little bit about the theme, which has also been endorsed by the WHO. Whilst the pandemic has and continues to take its toll on our mental health, the ability to reconnect through World Mental Health Day 2022 will provide us with an opportunity to rekindle our efforts to protect and improve mental health. Many aspects of mental health have been challenged, and already before the pandemic in 2019, an estimated 1 in 8 people globally were living with a mental disorder. At the same time, the services, skills, and funding available for mental health remain in short supply and fall far below what is needed, especially in low and middle income countries. The COVID-19 pandemic has created a global crisis for mental health, fueling short and long-term stresses and undermining the mental health of millions. Estimates put the rise in anxiety and depressive disorders at more than 25% during the first year of the pandemic. At the same time, mental health services have been severely disrupted, and the treatment gap for mental health conditions has also widened. Growing social and economic inequalities, protracted conflicts, violence, and public health emergencies affect whole populations, threatening progress through improved well-being. A staggering 84 million people worldwide were forcibly displaced during 2021. We must deepen the value and commitment we give to mental health as individuals, communities, and governments, and match that value with more commitment, engagement, and investment by all stakeholders across all sectors. We must strengthen mental health care so that the full spectrum of mental health needs is met through a community-based network of accessible, affordable, and quality services and supports. Stigma and discrimination continue to be a barrier to social inclusion and access to the right care. Importantly, we can all play our part in increasing awareness about which preventive mental health interventions work, and World Mental Health Day is an opportunity to do that collectively. We envision a world in which mental health is valued, promoted, and protected, where everyone has an equal opportunity to enjoy mental health and to exercise their human rights, and where everyone can access the mental health care they need. WHO will also be working with partners to launch a campaign around the theme of making mental health and well-being for all a global priority. So a little bit about what we do at Sumithrayo in respect of people who call over with mental health issues or concerns. Here at Sumithrayo, we engage with mental health as we would with any other concern a caller may have. We are feelings oriented, so while actively listening, we help people to explore their feelings and identify them, while we remain non-judgmental and accepting in what we hear. So there are people in distress who make contact with us and tell us that they have been diagnosed with a mental illness. All they may need is somebody to listen to them, something they are denied of in their world of family and friends. It's a huge relief for them to unburden all that's going on in their life with an empathetic stranger who gives him or her their undivided attention, even if or when the same narrative is repeated many times. Often they may complain that their medications cause them to be drowsy or lifeless and that they have stopped taking them. We then gently request them to discuss this with their doctor before taking such a decision. At the appropriate time, we will also explore if they may have suicidal thoughts. If they do, then our befriending will be navigated towards prevention by discussing other options. Then there may be people who may contact us over a concern, but do not know that they may be having some sort of mental illness. When we are able to detect this during the course of the befriending, we will suggest that they consider seeing a GP, as they may also require a professional, some kind of professional assistance. In both situations, we will always encourage the caller to visit us again when they feel they need to know to talk to us again. So that's a little bit about how Sumithrayo engages with people with mental health problems or issues or concerns. And Professor Shehan Williams is here with us now to talk about a very interesting topic that he has coined, uncertain times but certain minds. Professor Williams is the professor in psychiatry, Faculty of Medicine, University of Kelaniya, and a great supporter of Sumithrayo. Over to you, Professor Shehan Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Budiman. Pleasure to be here once again. And I'm delighted that I can speak a few words on World Mental Health Day. And I thank Sumithrayo for giving me this wonderful opportunity. I hope I can share my slides. My slide share enabled. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Thank you. Right. So I want it to be a little bit of an open discussion, and I think Jomo will facilitate that. But I thought as we look around us and as we contemplate, particularly as Sri Lankans, we know we live in very uncertain times. We really don't know where we are heading, whether we are really out of the crisis or is it just an illusion that we are having for a period of time, which may eventually again drag us into a dismal abyss or not. It's very uncertain times indeed for most of us. We are really not sure what's going to happen to us in terms of our future, not just ourselves, but our families, our children, and in terms of our finances, our lives, and how we are going to survive. So naturally, many of us feel very distressed. We feel very upset, and particularly during the height of the crisis, I think we were all at our wits' end, and many people were getting really upset and agitated, and we could see the anger each time we met somebody or went out on the streets, and the amount of chaos and even interpersonal conflicts that were rising in the midst of everything because of the whole uncertainty and lack of direction. Now, in this context, we need to be mindful of the situation and make sure that we stay sane and we keep our minds strong, because that's very important for us to survive through whatever crisis. And as I always say, it is possible. The human mind is extremely resilient. We've been through many crisis situations. In today's world, we are in some way blessed to have many opportunities and certainties and comforts which many of our forefathers and others who lived even maybe 100 years ago didn't have the joy of having. There's so much more uncertainty around us. But at the same time, there is also a lot of certainty that keeps us going, because we are in a comfortable situation than what we would have been maybe 100, 200, or 300 years ago. So whatever the situation, it's all about how we approach the situation and how we keep our minds grounded in what's important and focused on how we can keep our minds without getting too agitated, excited, or upset by the external circumstances, which are very real. It's not that we ignore them or minimize them. We look at them squarely, understand that they are real problems that we need to address and face and respond to appropriately, but at the same time, be able to be certain about our sanity and how we keep ourselves strong. Now, there are many aspects to life, but at the end of the day, we all want to live well. And living well, that gives human life meaning. And it's what now we call, or have coined the term, to be human flourishing. So, how do we flourish as humans across different societies, across different countries, across different situations? So, we want to live, but we also want those near and dear to us to also live well, and we want people around us to be also happy and in many ways contented. So there are aspects of living that are good for all human beings, simply because they make a life a human life. And there are many who have written on this, and the general consensus is that we identify three main categories of what constitutes good. And primarily, first among them is the value of relationships. So whatever happens around us, whatever the external circumstances, relationships make us live. Relationships with family members, friends, others in the community, even animals, and environment around us. And this is something we need to always be focused on. Unfortunately, when there is a crisis like what we went through, there is a threat, an existential threat to relationships. We are unable to sometimes meet with family members, with friends, have positive connections with our community, and even enjoy the environment around us. But we need to look at the basis of human life. And as human beings, we are what we are because of the relationships we have. Each of us is defined by other people, the people around us. We are what we are because of the people whom we have relationships. The second most important thing that makes us human and makes us live well is being engaged in activities. It could be play, it is work, it's about learning and understanding and also caring. These are important aspects that again keep our minds strong. We all need to be engaged actively in work, in recreation, in learning and understanding new things, and for caring for others. These two components that I mentioned are ultimately so important to living well. It's not money, it's not wealth, It's not having petrol, it's not having diesel, and not a interestingly proxy person for the government for their misdemeanors or their mismanagement. I completely uh, empathize with everyone who clearly knows that Sri Lanka was completely mismanaged. However, despite knowing all that, we need to be aware that we have to be focused on what living well is. And despite all the calamity around us, if we focus on what is important, can still be sane in the midst of all these difficulties and make sure our mental health is not compromised. And the third most important fact that makes us human is agency. Agency is the ability for us to control and change certain things around us. Our ability to be able to intervene in situations, to do things which make a difference to us, to others, and the environment around us. So, what does this lead us to? This leads us, unfortunately, to make us feel that we are in control, that sometimes, or most of the time, this agency sometimes inflates us to aspire to sit on a throne and to be in control and to rule anything and everything around us. And as I mentioned, partly Sri Lanka's problem is due to people trying to rule and think that they can control everything without listening to others around them, without being responsible. The agency that they have in ruling the country gives them a mandate to be kings and queens and enable them to do what pleases them. Interestingly, in our own ways, sometimes we also aspire to be kings and queens in our own situations, to be able to control everything around us, realizing little that there is very little control we have around the things. There are changes we can make, changes which can be positive, but we have to do it humbly, we have to do it sensitively, and have enough awareness around us and be able to listen to others to understand what it is that we can really rule over or really have control over. The reality around us is that uncertainty is the only certainty that we can hold on. When we have a little baby, as you see here, we have so much planned. We want to give the best to this little baby. This is every mother's dream. But the certainty that with which we want to do things is still shrouded in so much uncertainty with which we have to prepare our minds for. We have to understand that with every life, every moment, we are in a situation of uncertainty. These days, I think we all mourn the loss of a great lady, queen to many in the Commonwealth, someone who was loved so much. The outpouring of grief that we saw globally is of a person who again sat on a throne. But what intrigues me is that many people who sat on thrones have been ousted in sad situations. But when the queen died after so many years of ruling the world, I don't think there were many who hated her. If at all, the majority or more than everyone who knew her in some way admired her and grieved for her loss. I think there is so much to reflect on as why her rule was celebrated in contrast to what's happening around the world. And there you see a person who realized that despite being the queen, there was little she could control. Whether it was in her personal life, whether it was in her family, she went through so many uncertainties, calamities, and she still kept that silent, solid smile, stoicism, and an inner strength, which generated some stability in the minds of everyone she met and visited. She never overstepped her mark. She knew that she was the queen, but knew her limitations. And she spoke when she had to speak and spoke clearly with clarity and never attempted to destroy anybody, but always tried in whatever way to uplift and to say something constructive. I dare say I'm not being a great fan of royalty, but seeing the responses of the people, I realize that with her demise, the monarchy has to face so much uncertainty because she was the certainty in the midst of the uncertainty that prevailed in her numerous years of ruling Britain. So, my friends, I think we all need to stick to universal values: love, friendship, freedom, security, honesty, and health, which I think the Queens stood for, and which is an universal value that we all should stand for. And it is these factors that eventually give us certainty in the midst of all the chaos and mayhem and vandalism that we have seen in Sri Lanka over the past year. So I will stop there. I thought it's important for us to reflect a bit before we take the questions. I will stop sharing and I will open the floor for you to talk. And please free to ask questions. There are many aspects to mental health, but I thought just reflecting on the Queen even on this day may help us understand that life has its ups and downs, has so many instances where we despair. But despite everything, we can stand strong, gentle, and steadfast for what we believe and what we stand for, and still contribute to our lives, to those around us, still be a positive force in this world. So, Jomo, thank you. You
Thanks,
would like me to
Professor.
say that
I have a small request from you to kindly summarize that in the other two languages in which you know to be fluent in, and let's try to be a bit inclusive today. may we have a small summary from you?
Okay,
Thank you.
right. So I'll share it again in Sinhala. So, okay. මම මේ අවස්ථාවේදී සුමිත්‍රයෝ ආයතනයේට මට මේ පොඩි ලෙක්චර් දෙන්න අවස්ථාවක් ලබා දුන්නාට මම ස්තුතිවන්ත වෙනවා. මම විශේෂයෙන්ම කතා කරේ අපි ලංකාවේ පුරවැසියෝ හැටියට මේ මුදල සෑහෙන පීඩාවක් වෙලා තියෙනවා. ජීවිතේ ඉස්සරහට මොකද්ද කරන්නේ? පිට අපේ පවුල් වලට අනාගතයක් තියෙනවද? අපේ රටට අනාගතයක් තියෙනවද? රට දාලා යන්න ඕනද කියන ගොඩක් ප්‍රශ්න ඇතුලේ හිටියත් තාමත් ඉන්නවා. නමුත් මේවැනි අවස්ථාවලදී කොහොමද අපේ මනස ශක්තිමත්ව තියාගන්නේ? කොච්චර අපේ පරිසරයේ වටපිටාවේ ප්‍රශ්න තිබුණත් අපි කොහොමද අපල ශක්තිමත්ව අපේ සතුට තියාගන්නේ කියන එක ගැන මොහොතක් හිතලා බලමු. අපි හැමෝම බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ හොඳට ජීවත් වෙන්න. living well කියන දේ. අපි හැමෝටම පොදු දේවල් තියෙනවා. මිනිස්සු හැටියට මොකද්ද මේ හොඳ ජීවිතයක් කියන්නේ. විශේෂයෙන්ම එකට ගොඩක් අය ගැන ලියලා තිනවා. විශේෂයෙන්ම හඳුනාගත් පළවෙනි එක තමයි අපි හැමෝටම relationship. නැත්නම් අපිට අපේ සහෝදරත්වයේ අනිත් අයක තියෙන සම්බන්ධතා ගොඩනැගීම අපිට හැමෝටම වැදගත්. අපේ පවුල ඇතුළේ තියෙන සම්බන්ධතා යාළුවෙක් සමාජෙක සතුන් එක්ක ඊට වඩා ඒ පරිසරයේ එක්ක තියෙන අපේ සම්බන්ධය. ඒක අපේ living well කියන දේ හොඳට ජීවත් වීමේ මූලික කොටසක්. මිනිස්සු හැටියට අපි සමාජ ගත කරන දේ තමයි අපි සතුට ලබා ගන්න. මං කියන දේ තීරණය වෙන්නේ මගේ සමාජයේ. මම කවුද කියන එක වුණත් මම වුණත් දන්නේ මගේ සමාජය තමයි මම කවුද කියලා මාව හඳුනාගන්නේ. ඒ තමයි අපි හැමෝම යම් කිසි දෙකේ යෙදිලා ඉන්නවා. ඒ දේ වලින් තමයි අපි හොඳට ජීවත් වෙනවා කියන එක අපි හඳුනාගන්නේ. අපේ වැඩ අපි කරන වැඩ ඒකේ ගෙදර වෙන්න පුළුවන්. මවක් විදියට කරන වැඩ වෙන්න පුළුවන්. මං සෙල්ලම් කරන එක වෙන්න පුළුවන්. ඒ වගේම මම යම් තොරතුරු ලබා ගන්න එක අනිත් අය ගැන උනන්දු වෙන්න එක කියන්නේ අනිත් කරුණාවක් වෙන්න එකෙන් අපි මිනිස්යෝ විදියට හොඳට ජීවත් වෙනවා. තුන්වෙනි දේ තමයි හොඳ ජීවිතය කියන්නේ අපේ වටපිට තියෙන දේවල් වලට අපි කරන දෙයින් යම් කිසි වෙනසක් ඇති වෙනවා කියන ඒ ශක්තිය. ඒක තමයි අපි ඒජන්සි කියලා කියන්නේ. සමහර විට මේ ශක්තිය අපි වැඩිපුර ගෙනිච්චම තමයි අපි හිතනවා මං ඕන එකක් කරන්න පුළුවන් මං හිතන විදියට කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. මේම කරන්න ගිහිල්ලා තමයි ගොඩක් අය වැය තියෙන්නේ. නමුත් අපි වුණත් සමහර තැන්වල අපි දන්නේ නැතුව අපි යම් කිසි පාලනයක් අපි පොඩි දෙයක් වෙන්න පුළුවන්. මගේ ගේ ඇතුලේ වෙන්න පුළුවන්. මම හිතන ගේ ගෙදරට ආපුවම මම තමයි රජා හරි රජිනිය හරි. මං ඒ පොඩි දෙයක් පාලනය කරගෙන ඉන්න උත්සාහ කරනවා. යම් කිසි පාලනයක් තියෙන්නේ හොඳයි නම් පාලනය කිරීම කියන එක අපි හැමදේම දන්නවා කියලා අපි හැමදේම පාලනය කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා හිතලා කරන එක නෙවෙයි. අපි හිතන්න ඕනේ අපිට පාලනය කරන්න පුළුවන් දේවල් ටිකයි. ගොඩක් දේවල් අපි පාලනය යටතේ නෑ. අපි පුළුවන් තැන්වල අපි පොසිටිව් පාලනයක් කරනවා. නමුත් අනිත් වෙලාවෙන් අපි හැම වෙලෙම ඔන්න ප්‍රශ්නෙට මුහුණ දීලා ඒ දෙයට කොහොමද අපි විසඳුමක් හොයන්න පුළුවන් කියන එකට අපි ලෑස්ති වෙන්න ඕනේ. ජීවිතේ වෙනස් වීම අනිත්‍යභාවය ඕන දෙයක් සතුට හෝ ඕන අවස්ථාවකදී එන්න පුළුවන්. වෙනස් වීම ඒක තමයි අපිට තියෙන එකම ස්ථීර දේ. අනිත්‍ය කියන එක තමයි අපේ මම දන්නවා ආගම තුලින් වලත් අපිට කියලා තියෙන්නේ හැමදේම නැති වෙනවා වෙනස් වෙනවා. සෙන් කියලා එක දෙයක් නෑ. වෙනස් වීම තමයි ඇත්තම අපිට තියෙන ස්ථීර certainty කියලා අපි කියනවා. මම මොකක්ද මේ අපේ පිතානේ රජිනී හිතන්නේ එයා අන්තරා වුණාම ලෝකෙම ගොඩක් පිරිසක් ගොඩක් දුක් වුණා. එයාගේ ගුණ වර්ණනය කළා. නමුත් මේ රජිනියගෙන් මට හිතුණා යම් කිසි දෙයක් අපි ඉගෙන ගන්න. එයා පාලනය කරාට ඒ පාලනය කරන විදිහ තමයි එයාට ආදරයක් ලෝකෙම ලැබුණා කියන එක. එයාගේ පාලනේ මම හැමදේම මට කරන්න පුළුවන් මම ලෝකෙ පාලනය කරනවා කියන එක අතරලා එයා ඉහෙන්ද විදියට කියන දේ හරියාකාරයෙන් කියලා එයාගේ පුද්ගලික ජීවිතේ සෑහෙන දේවල් වලට මුහුණ දෙනවා. ඒ තුළ සෑම දේ සෙම යන්නට එයා පොඩි හිනාවත් එක්ක හැම ප්‍රශ්නෙටම එයා මුහුණ දීලා ඉස්සරහට ගියා. එයා කොයි අවස්ථාවකදීවත් එයාගේ බලය පෙන්වන්න හැමදේම දන්නවා කියන එක හිතට පෙන්වන්න එයා උත්සාහ කරේ නෑ. එයාගෙන් අපි හැම ලෝකෙම තියෙන සමහර වැලියුස් අපි කියනවා. universal values කියලා love, friendship, freedom, security, honesty, and love ආදරේ කියන්නේ මිත්‍රත්වයේ friendship ඉදහස ආරක්ෂාව සතිය honesty සෞඛ්‍ය කියන මේ ඔක්කොටම යා යම් කිසි යක් දුන්නා. මේක මිනිස්ය හැමෝටම අත්‍යවශ්‍ය දෙයක්. මේවා අපි ආරක්ෂා කරන්න අපි ඉදිරිපත් අපේ ජීවිතයේ අනිත්‍යයේ ජීවිතයේ කියන එක දැනගෙන අපි මේවා තමයි අපි ලෝකේ ඉගත් විදියට හඳුනන්නේ. මේවට අපේ හිත දෙන්න ඕනේ අනිත්‍යවට වඩා. ඉතින් ඒකයි මම මොකක් හිතන්න කියලා මේ අවස්ථාවකදී කිව්වේ. මම එකපාරක් දෙමළෙන් කියන්න තව පාරක් කරුණා කළා වෙලාව ටිකක් දෙන්න. இந்த நேரத்திலே நான் சுமித்ரேயோ என்ற ஸ்தாபனத்துக்கு நன்றியை தெரிவித்துக் கொள்கிறேன். பல பிரச்சனைகள் மத்தியிலே நாங்கள் இங்கே மக்கள் என்ற விதத்திலே நாங்கள் கொடுத்துக் கொண்டு வருகிறோம். பல கேள்விகள் எங்களுடைய மனதிலே எழும்பிக் கொண்டிருக்கிறது. நாங்கள் இந்த பக்கத்துக்கு போகிறோம், எங்களுடைய எதிர்காலம் என்ன, எங்களுடைய பிள்ளைகள் எதிர்காலம் என்ன, பிரச்சனைக்குள்ளால வழியால வருமோ இல்லையோ அல்லது போய் முடிய போகிறேன் என்ற பல கேள்விகள் எங்கள் மனதில் எழும்பிக் கொண்டிருக்கிறது. ஒரு நிரந்தரம் இல்லாத ஒரு மனநிலையிலே நாங்கள் இருந்து கொண்டிருக்கிறோம். ஆனால் இதன் மத்தியிலே நாங்கள் எல்லாரும் தைரியமாக எங்களுடைய மனங்களை ஒருநிலைப்படுத்தி ஒரு நல்ல ஒரு ஸ்தாபமான ஒரு முகம் கொடுக்கக்கூடிய ஒரு மனநிலையை நாங்கள் ஏற்படுத்திக் கொள்ள வேண்டும். நாங்கள் எல்லாரும் நல்லா வாழ விரும்புகிறோம். என்று சொல்லி மனிதன் என்ற முறையிலே சில விஷயங்கள் எங்களை நல்லா வாழ்றதுக்கு முக்கியமாக இருக்கு. அதிலே முதலாவதுதான் உங்களுடைய உறவுகள், குடும்பத்தோடு, உங்களுடைய நண்பர்களோடு, உங்களுடைய சமுதாயத்தோடு, அது மாத்திரமில்லை உங்களுடைய பாரிசரை அல்லது சுற்றலோட மிருகங்களோட மற்ற வாழ்கிற ஊனங்களோட நாங்கள் இருக்கிற அந்த உறவு இதிலே தான் நாங்கள் மனிதன் என்ற முறையிலே எங்களுடைய வாழ்க்கையின் முக்கியத்துவம் காண்கிறோம். நாங்கள் மற்றவர்களோட உறவு இல்லாவிட்டால் எங்களுக்கு என்ற ஒரு ஐடென்டிட்டி அல்லது நான் யார் என்பதை கூட நான் தெரிய கூடாமல் இருக்கும். மற்றவர்கள் தான் நான் யார் என்பதை தீர்மானிக்கிறார். அதே மாதிரி தான் இரண்டாவது எங்களுடைய முக்கியத்துவம், நாங்கள் செய்கிற எங்களுடைய ஈடுபாடுகள், எங்களுடைய வேலை. நான் ஒரு அம்மாவா இருக்க முடியும், நான் வீட்டில் செய்கிற வேலை பிள்ளைகளுக்காக நான் செய்கிற கஷ்டமாக செய்கிறது, நான் டீச்சராக இருக்க முடியும், நான் செய்கிற பல வேலைகள், அதே போல நான் பெற்றுக்கொள்கிற அறிவு, அதோடு மற்றவர்களுக்கு நான் செய்கிற உபாரங்கள், கேரிங் சொல்வோம், அவர்களுக்கு கேர் பண்ற விதம், இதுதான் முக்கியமானது. நாங்கள் மனிதன் என்பதை தீர்மானிக்கிறது, நாங்கள் நல்லா வாழ்றோம் என்பதை தீர்மானிக்கிறது. எங்களுடைய காசு பணம் எங்களுடைய சொத்து அல்ல, ஆனால் இந்த ஒரு காரியம் தான் எங்களை ஒரு மனிதராக முன்கொண்டு. மூன்றாவது தான் ஏஜென்சி என்று சொல்லுவோம். அதாவது நாங்கள் எந்த முறையிலே ஒரு காரியத்தை செய்து ஒரு மாற்றத்தை ஏற்படுத்தி மற்றவர்களுக்கு நன்மையை கொண்டு வருகிறோம். உங்களுடைய வாழ்க்கையிலையும் மற்றவர்களுக்கும் நாங்கள் ஒரு கண்ட்ரோலா, நாங்கள் ஒரு காரியத்தை செய்யும் பொழுது நாங்கள் அதை செய்து அதை ஒரு முடித்து அதிலே ஒரு திருப்தியை எடுக்கக்கூடியதா இருக்கு. ஆனால் சில இடங்களிலே நாங்கள் இந்த நாங்கள் ஒரு பெருந்தகங்களை பற்றி நினைத்து நான் ஏனவும் செய்ய முடியும், நான் எல்லா விஷயங்களையும் பண்ண முடியும், இப்படி யோசிச்சு பலர் விழுகையை கண்டிருக்கிறார்கள். அரச பெரியார்கள் கூட உங்களுக்கு சுற்றி வர விழுந்து கொண்டிருக்கிறதை நாங்கள் கண்டிருக்கிறோம். எங்களுடைய வாழ்க்கையில நாங்கள் சிலரோடு யோசிக்கிற எங்களுடைய வீடுகள், எங்களுடைய சுற்றாடல்களை நாங்கள் எங்களை விரும்ப மாதிரி ஆட்சி படைக்கலாம். உண்மை எங்களுக்கு செய்யக்கூடிய விஷயங்கள் அவற்றை பார்த்து நாங்கள் கூட்டி தாழ்ந்த நாங்கள் ஹம்பிளா, அதாவது எங்களுடைய மனதை அடக்கி நாங்கள் மற்றவர்களோடு கேட்டு நாங்கள் செய்யக்கூடியதை செய்ய வேண்டும். உங்களுடைய வாழ்க்கையில் யாருக்கும் ஒரு பிள்ளை கொடுத்த ஒரு அம்மா யோசிக்கிறேன், இந்த பிள்ளையை நான் இப்படி கொண்டு வரணும், இப்படி வளர்த்தெடுக்கணும்னு சொல்லி உண்மையாக அது என்ன மாதிரி முடியுமோன்ற எங்களுக்கும் சொல்ல முடியாது. அந்த அனித்தியமான காரியம்தான் எங்களுக்கு மனதில் நித்தியமாக அல்லது எங்களுக்கு நாங்கள் தீர்மானிக்கக்கூடியது, நாங்கள் யோசிக்கக்கூடியதான முக்கியமான ஒரு தீர்மானம் தான். எந்த ஒரு விஷயமும் எங்களுக்கு முன்னாடியாக சொல்ல முடியாது. அது எந்த மாதிரியும் போகலாம். பிரச்சனைகள், நன்மைகள் எல்லாம் விதத்தில் நாங்கள் முன் கொடுக்க வேண்டியிருக்கு. இதை பற்றி யோசிக்கும் போது ராஜ்யத்தின் அரசி எலிசபெத் மகா அரசி எனக்கு ஞாபகம் வருகிறது. அவர் 10 ஆண்டுகளாக அவருடைய நாட்டை அவர் இந்த ஸ்தானத்தில் இருந்தாலும் அவர் சாகும் பொழுது பலர் அழுது அவர்கள் துக்கத்தை தெரிவித்தார்கள். அவரை பற்றி கூடாத பேசினர் ஒரு தரம் இல்லை என்று சொல்ல முடியுமே. அவருடைய ஆளுகையை ஒரு தரம் காட்டவில்லை. அந்த பல ஆண்டு காலங்களாக எல்லா பிரச்சனையாலும் தனிப்பட்ட வாழ்க்கையிலே கூட பெரிய பெரிய பிரச்சனைகளுக்கு முகம் கொடுக்க வேண்டியிருந்தது. எல்லாற்றுக்கும் மத்தியிலே ஒரு சிரிப்போடு ஒரு அமைதியாக எல்லா விஷயங்களுக்கும் முகம் கொடுத்து மற்றவர்களுக்கு நன்மையை செய்த ஒரு அரசியாக நாங்கள் அவரை காண்கிறோம். இதன் மூலமாக நாங்கள் சில பொது குறிக்கோள்களை நாங்கள் காண்கிறோம். எல்லா மக்களுக்கும் பொதுவானது அன்பு, ஃப்ரெண்ட்ஷிப், நாங்கள் ஒருவரோடு இருக்கிற உறவு, ஐக்கியம், ஃப்ரீடம், விடுதலையோ நாங்கள் செய்யக்கூடியதை மற்றவர்களும் செய்து எங்களுடைய பாதுகாப்பு, சத்தியத்தை பேசி நல்ல சௌக்கியமாக வாழ்வது, இது எங்கள் எல்லாருக்கும் முக்கியமான இந்த காரியங்களே. எங்களுடைய மனதை நாங்கள் விட்டோமானால் எங்களுக்கு நல்ல ஒரு மனநிலையோட நாங்கள் வாழ முடியும் என்பதை நான் இன்று உங்களோடு பகிர்ந்து கொள்கிறேன். நன்றி.
Thank you very much, Professor, for taking the time over tri-language presentation, which is very rare to experience, and we're very grateful to you. Professor, I have a question which I have always been wanting to ask somebody like you. It may or may not be relevant to your topic, but certainly it is relevant to what's happening in our country, where psychological issues have cropped up. Professor, when we were young, I mean, I say we, I think I'm a little older than you. So probably the 70s, I would talk about the 70s when we were growing up. At that time, there were large families, Professor, 4 or 5 children in a family. The mother or the wife was always the housewife, while the father or the husband was the breadwinner. And we had a lot of challenges, turbulent times, struggles, which we were able to navigate with skills that we had inherited, I suppose, or learned. And importantly, at that time, I cannot remember hearing the word psychiatrist or psychologist or therapist in my life, because I don't think there were many around at that time. But we managed to navigate, we managed to find our way around, and there were not many casualties, I would say, mental health casualties. Professor, what has happened down the line for the shift that is happening today, or maybe it started in the late 90s, where people are now self-diagnosing and rushing to psychiatrists, psychologists, therapists, and this mental health has become a huge issue. Have I made myself clear, Professor? I'd like to know, how did it shift?
Yeah. So again, I must say that every answer has many facets to it. I don't want to sort of give a simple answer
Yes.
or try to sort of pinpoint one issue as the key reason for this. I think in, in the early 70s, or maybe at that point in time, there may have been lesser awareness of mental health issues, and therefore people may have been suffering silently, so we don't know about it, and there may not have been opportunities to people to face or seek help. But at the same time, I think the world, although, as I said, is more comfortable and more enabling today, is also very complex. And there is, as you say, a difference in the quality and the quantity of relationships we have. The world was a much smaller place then, even from the point of view of the mind. It was just your family and just your brothers and sisters, the school and church and a few people around. But today's world is a global world. We are influenced not just by our local societies, but things that happen in some other far corner of the world. The war in Ukraine has affected us in ways that we cannot imagine. And I think the Second World War perhaps didn't affect us to that extent, even though we were very much a part of that war. So similarly, the global world, every person is affected in many ways by so many external factors. The information overload that we have, so much knowledge which is at our fingertips, good and bad, and information as well as misinformation that goes around, which we have to process and handle in our mind. So many, if you take, when you were, I was also around in the 70s when the television came around. We just had Rupavahini, and that channel also had to telecast only for 3-4 hours a day. And today we have so many television channels, so many news channels, so many radio channels, so much information coming in, which is too much for us to process. So obviously all these factors, the expectations we have, and perhaps we pay a price for having more knowledge also, and smaller families. So although we have more connectedness, our relationships, the quality has perhaps dwindled. We have lesser quality relationships. Despite having so much connectivity, we still are busier than what we were maybe 30, 40 years ago, or what our parents were during that time. So many challenges come on which make us uh, more vulnerable to mental health issues because our minds have not adapted as fast as maybe the environment has changed and brought in new challenges every day. And that's perhaps why we are struggling quite a lot because we haven't learned how to lead and how to deal with these changes at the pace it's happening.
Thank you very much, Professor, because I do agree with you now that it is an information overload that is causing us the beginning of all our problems. And it's a huge information overload, and it's so difficult to cope with it. Um, Professor, also, are there any initiatives being carried out outside of our metropolis to educate communities around skills and strategies to navigate uncertain times in a psychological context? I'm talking about outside Bamboo and metropolis.
Yeah. So today, I think one of the biggest challenges is reaching people. I mean, obviously, the same social media reach is there all across the country. So the news channels, the gossip channels, all of them reach a part of the country, and I don't think there is any hitch in that. Similarly, in today's context, I mean, I'm sure anyone, even the most distant corner of Sri Lanka, is able to access resources for mental health because of the internet and so on and so forth. And there are enough and more resources even on YouTube, and there are so many people who talk about various ways to control your mind, to meditate, to do yoga, to relax. So many religious programs, religious channels, and so on and so forth. But I'm not sure whether people consciously take time to listen or to take time to think about their mental health and make time to reflect on their own wellness. This is the key thing. People just imbibe all the messages that come in. And as you know, the social media is a huge influence, which leads people into echo chambers. There is nothing but gloom and doom, and there is a little bit of information, but a lot of misinformation, which is exaggerating and catastrophizing the disasters around us. So it's very difficult for a person unless they consciously realize that they need to get away from it, just focus a little bit on the environment around them, see the birds singing, and realize that whatever happens, they will continue singing, and we have to stop and listen.
Yes, thanks, Professor. Just to go on another question which might connect with the bird singing. I think mindfulness is another popular strategy spoken about globally in the context of navigating turbulent times. What would your comments be on that?
So I think it's a good process. It helps for us to focus on the here and now, helps to relax the mind and not be always focused on the problems and the troubles around us. Um, However, I mean, not everybody may sort of subscribe to this view, and some people are tuned more to be able to reflect and be able to concentrate and have mindful practices, which can be done wherever or whatever you're doing, like you said, even just listening to the music of the birds or birds singing or just feeling the wind or just listening to nature and just being in that moment is what the sum of mindfulness would be. For us, uh, I wouldn't necessarily say that mindfulness is the only thing. Even talking to somebody, spending time with positive friends, doing some physical exercise, going for a walk, which all integrate certain aspect of human relationships, your connectedness to people as well as the environment. Even going and helping somebody, caring for somebody, doing various things. Whatever gives us agency and meaning, as I mentioned, is also something that will help us get away or get over our distress. And that's very important. Rather than me just sitting and only thinking about problems and what's going on, and the gloom and the doom, and the impending things that are going to happen, and being frustrated and angry all the time. It's about doing positive things. And that's what we should find time to. Life is short, and I don't think we should waste too much time only focusing on the problems, although the problems are very real and we need to appropriately address them.
Thanks, Professor. And I have another question in the context of uncertainty. People have many positive beliefs around why they should continue to worry. How would you respond to that?
Now, again, worry is not entirely a bad thing. It's probably a human mechanism to help us be careful, to make certain changes, to uh, identify mistakes or wrongdoings and correct them, to take positive action. So anxiety, worry, and so on are natural responses which have a protective effect. If we didn't worry about anything, if we just went around thinking that everything will be fine, again that would be counterproductive to living, because life has certain uncertainties. We have to prepare for them. We have to be realistic. We have to face situation, and worrying is by itself not an issue. But the issue is always being stuck in worry, not being able to get out of that spiral of uncertainty. But what is important is to accept that life is uncertain, but try to control the things that we can control. And when we can't, and the worry is getting out of control, that we seek appropriate help. Maybe, as you said, talk to somebody, maybe first instance with family, friends, or even if we don't have anybody, call Sumithrayo and discussion with somebody as to how they can overcome their worries, because sometimes the worries are not as big as we deem them to be. And when you talk to somebody, you realize that okay, there are solutions, not as bad as I thought it was. There could be worse situations. There's some way out of this. There's a door that's open, and I could walk out through this. And that's what's important. So I think identifying worry helps us to identify when we get ourselves stuck in a situation. But it's important to realize that we are worrying too much, and now we need to seek help, and sometimes professional help. And thankfully, that is available, and we need to reach out and not hesitate to get help when we need to get help. And that's what worry sort of signals. It's like pain. A little bit of pain can be expected. It's again a protective mechanism which helps us get away from a noxious situation or stimuli. But at the same time, the pain persists and it's not being relieved, and if you're suffering, you need to seek professional help. That's the key message, even in relation to worries.
Thanks, Professor. A last question, which is, I think we would like to ask it from you in the context of our Sumithrayo service. You see, when we do have callers, as you know, we are not judgmental. If somebody comes with a mental illness issue, we talk to them and listen to them like we would do with any other concern. It will be a judgmental session. But sometimes while talking to a person who does not come across or doesn't say that they have come because of a mental illness, we realize that they may need some kind of professional help, Professor. At that time, what would you think our best way of referring them to? Is it a GP or should we go over that and into a professional?
So it will depend on the situation and the openness of the individual per se to seek help. And I mean, if you think the problem is quite serious and the waiting time to see a GP professional may take longer, it's always fine to, if you think that the person is quite distressed and needs help immediately, and there could be a dangerous situation, a situation where there is considerable risk to the person or somebody around them because of that, then I think it's always worthwhile referring as soon as possible to a mental health professional. As you said, I mean, I think now we have services all over the country, and there is awareness among all doctors. So even a general practitioner, the first instance, if they are not open to seeing a doctor who's particularly qualified in psychiatry or another mental health professional, then maybe they could be their GP and discuss it. So they may have more confidence in the GP, may be able to convince them to see someone if necessary.
Yes. I was talking to somebody recently who lives in Australia, Professor, and what he told me was that if you needed to see a mental health professional, you had to go through a GP. There was no way that you could bypass that and go straight to. Are you aware of that? Is that correct, what he said?
Yes, so that's true for a country like Britain or some other Western countries where everybody, particularly for health needs, is registered as a general practitioner.
Okay, okay.
He is the gatekeeper, so you need to go and speak to them and they will refer you to somebody else. However, you could contact an organization like Sumithrayo or a helpline and so on, and they too will direct you to various services, which may not be through the National Health Service or the formal health situation, which you may be able to access without being referred by the GP.
Okay. And one more, Professor, about our uh, 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 government hospitals. Do they provide the services of a psychologist, or is it only a psychiatrist?
So at the moment, we have a team and it includes a psychiatrist, but we also have psychiatric nurses, we have social workers. Many units also have counselors, and also we have psychologists in training.
Okay.
But the formal clinical psychology position is still not available in the government hospitals at this point in time, although the Ministry of Health is working on recruiting psychologists to the
Okay.
health sector.
Because, Professor, we see a huge amount of lady psychologists passing out at the moment from various institutions, and we wonder where are they going to get their employment, in what kind of, unless they're going into HR in the corporate sector. But I do hope that they find some employment in the government sector, since they probably need people like that. Don't you think so? You would be aware of the amount of really psychologists being passing out at the moment.
Yes. So it's a bit of a broad subject because the thing is, when it comes to counseling psychology or clinical psychology, you need to have a special registrable degree to practice in hospitals.
Okay.
This a lot of people are not aware of. Just getting a psychology degree per se doesn't enable you to, I mean, it's like getting a degree in bioscience or something like that, and whether you can practice as a doctor or something like
That's
that. You need to
interesting.
go to a specific course to it's at the moment Colombo University is offering the clinical psychology course. So there are but a few recognized. You have to be registered to be able to practice as a clinical psychologist with the Sri Lanka Medical Council, because you are providing treatment for which you are responsible, and you have to be accountable and make sure that you conduct this work within a framework, a code of practice. and you cannot just provide therapies. You have to have monitoring mechanism and so on. So just this is where sometimes I think a lot of people are misled, because you raised this point, because so many people is that because they just keep taught courses on psychology, and a lot of people who go in this course think they are going to end up as psychologists, and that is really not true. It's a very long pathway to become a clinical psychologist, because as I said, it's just providing help for people with distress is not a simple exercise. You have to be quite competent and know what you're doing when you try to help people in a professional manner.
Thanks, Professor. Again, I have to worry you for a kind of a quick summary before we close in Sinhala. If you don't mind, just those questions that you answered, if you can remember your answers.
I
I'm just
hope
trying
I'm
to.
not forgotten.
No, it's okay. Whatever you remember, you can kind of summarize in Sinhala, and it'll be nice. I'm sure, because you made some very, very important points.
Right. මම හිතන්නේ අපිට මම දැන් කතා කරපු ප්‍රශ්න කිහිපයක් ගැන කෙටියෙන් කියන්න පොඩි අවස්ථාවක් මම මේ ගන්නවා. අපිට ප්‍රශ්නයක් තියෙනකොට කොහොමද ඒක මුහුණ දෙන්නේ? ඒ අවස්ථාවලදී mindfulness කියන දේ මේ මොහොතේ ඉන්න එක හොඳයිද කියන ප්‍රශ්නයක් මට ඉදිරිපත් කරා. ඇත්තටම මේක හොඳ දෙයක්. mindfulness ගැන ගොඩක් scientific evidence දැනට තියෙනවා. ඒ ගැන YouTube වල වෙන net වල අපි හොයාගන්න පුළුවන්. මේවා ගැන අපි මේ රටේ කොහේ හිටියත් අපිට හොයලා බලන්න පුළුවන් අවස්ථාවක් තියෙනවා. මම කිව්වේ තමයි mindfulness එක්කම අපිට හැම අවස්ථාවකම අපි ප්‍රශ්නයක් එනකොට අපි සමහර විට worry කරනවා. mindfulness අපිට worry එකෙන් මිදෙන්න උදව් වෙනවා. ඒ වගේම worry කරන එක නැත්තම් ඉතුරු එක සාමාන්‍ය දෙයක්. ඒක සමහර විට අපිට උදව් වන්න ඒක වැඩිපුර යනකොට අපිට ඒකෙන් මිදෙන්න බැරි වෙනකොට අපි යම් කිසි උදව්වක් කෙනෙක්ගෙන් ගන්න එක හොඳයි. සුමිත්‍රයෝගෙන් හරි නැත්නම් සමහර විට වෛද්‍යවරයෙක් එක්ක හරි කතා කරලා ඒක දී කරන එක හොඳයි කියන එක මම කිව්වා. ඒ වගේම අන්තිමට යවුවා මේ සයිකොලොජි කෝසස් ගොඩක් ඔෆර් කරනවා. වදුලෙන් පාස් අවුට් වෙන අයට ඒගොල්ලන් සයිකොලොජිස්ට්ලා විදියට හොස්පිටල්ස් වල වැඩ කරන්න පුළුවන් කියලා. හොස්පිටල් වලට අපි සයිකොලොජිස්ට් රික්‍රූට්මන්ට් එක කරගෙන යනවා. නමුත් එතන පොඩ්ඩක් අපි හිතන්න ඕනේ නිකන් හැම සයිකොලොජි කෝස් එකම ඒ අවස්ථාවට එතන අපි අතු කරන්න බැරි වෙනවා. ඒ සයිකොලොජිස්ට් කෙනෙක් වෙන්න, ක්ලිනිකල් සයිකොලොජිස්ට් කෙනෙක් වෙන්න යම් කිසි දිග ප්‍රෝග්‍රෑම් එකක් කරන්න තියෙනවා. ප්‍රැක්ටිකල්ස් ගොඩක් දෙන්න වෙනවා. ඒකට සුදුසු තැන් කීපයයි කියන්නේ කණ්ඩායම විතරයි. ලංකා කවුන්සිල් ආයතනයේ රෙජිස්ටර් කරන්න පුළුවන්. ඒගොල්ලන් විතරයි අපි හොස්පිටල්ස් වලට ගන්න පුළුවන් කියන දේ. நான் தமிழ்ல சொன்னால் பல கேள்விகளை கேட்டார்கள். அதாவது நாங்கள் மெடிடேஷன் அல்லது மைண்ட்னஸ் போன்ற காரியங்களை செய்து எங்களுடைய பிரச்சனைகளிலிருந்து நாங்கள் வெளிவர முடியுமா என்று கட்டாயமாக இதை பற்றி பல விஷயங்களை நாங்கள் இன்டர்நெட் மூலமாக நாங்கள் அறிந்து கொள்ளலாம். அதே போல ஒரி பண்ண போது எல்லாரும் நாங்கள் பிரச்சனை வரும்போது எங்களுக்கு பல சிந்தனைகள் வருகிறது. ஆனால் ஒரி என்ற காரியம் விளையாட்டு காரியம் அல்ல. ஆனால் அது எங்களுக்கு உதவலாம். ஆனால் அது வழி கூடுதலாக இருந்தால் நாங்கள் அந்த நேரத்தில் வைத்தியரையோ நல நிபுணரையோ சந்திச்சு நாங்கள் அதை பற்றி கதைப்படுகிற உதவியை பெற்றுக்கொள்ற நல்ல விஷயம். அதே மாதிரி சைக்காலஜி கோர்சஸ் சைக்காலஜிஸ்ட் ஆஸ்பத்திரிகளிலே ஏன் என்று இல்லை என்று சொல்லி கேட்டார்கள். நாங்கள் எதிர்பார்க்கிறோம் கதியாக அப்படியான சைக்காலஜிஸ்ட்லாம் நாங்கள் ஹாஸ்பிட்டல்ஸ்ல நாங்கள் வேலைக்கு நாங்கள் எடுக்க முடியும் என்று சொன்னாலும் பலர் பல சைக்காலஜி கோர்சஸை இன்று ஆஃபர் பண்ணுகிறார்கள். இந்த எல்லா கோர்சஸும் இந்த இப்படியான சைக்காலஜிஸ்டாக மாறுவதற்கு உதவுவது அல்ல. அதுக்கு ஒரு விசேஷ ட்ரைனிங் அவர்கள் போக வேண்டியிருக்கிறது என்பதையும் நான் இந்த இடத்திலே பேசினேன்.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so much for those inputs in all three languages and for your time. I do hope you enjoyed being with us today as much as we enjoyed being with you, listening to you again. You've been a great supporter of Sumithrayo and never refuse to be on our webinars. Thank you so much. And we hope to see you again. And good night to you.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.